This is Mr. B reads J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and we're going to start with the incredible work of The Fellowship of the Ring, arguably one of the best books ever written. This story series is aimed at our older children in years 4, 5 and 6, and we're going to enjoy listening with it to the incredible soundtrack from the films, the music of Howard Shore. So sit back and enjoy the wonderful work and music of Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring. Chapter 1. A Long-Expected Party. When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years, ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return. The riches he had brought back from his travels had now become a local legend, and it was popularly believed, whatever the old folk might say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure, and if that was not enough for fame, there was also his prolonged vigour to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was much the same as at 50. At 99, they began to call him well preserved, but unchanged would have been nearer the mark. There were some that shook their heads and thought that this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess apparently perpetual youth as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth. It will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. But so far trouble had not come, and as Mr. Baggins was generous with his money, most people were willing to forgive him his oddities and his good fortune. He remained on visiting terms with his relatives, except of course the Sackville Bagginses, and he had many devoted admirers among the hobbits of poor and unimportant families, but he had no close friends until some of his younger cousins began to grow up. The eldest of these, and Bilbo's favourite, was young Frodo Baggins. When Bilbo was 99, he adopted Frodo as his heir, and brought him to live at Bag End, and the hopes of the Sackville Bagginses were finally dashed. Bilbo and Frodo happened to have the same birthday, September the 22nd. "You had better come and live here, Frodo, my lad," said Bilbo one day, "and then we can celebrate our birthday parties comfortably together." At that time, Frodo was still in his tweens, as the hobbits called the irresponsible 20s, between childhood and the coming of age at 33. 12 more years passed. Each year the Bagginses had given very lively combined birthday parties at Bag End, but now it was understood that something quite exceptional was being planned for that autumn. Bilbo was going to be 111, a rather curious number and a very respectable age for a hobbit. The old Took himself had only reached 130, and Frodo was going to be 33, an important number, the date of his coming of age. That all took place in September, as fine a month as you could ask. A day or two later, a rumour, probably started by the knowledgeable Sam, was spread about that there were going to be fireworks. Fireworks, and what is more, such as had not been seen in the Shire for nigh on a century, not indeed since the old Took died. Days passed and the day drew nearer. An odd-looking wagon laden with odd-looking packages rolled into Hobbiton one evening and toiled up the hill to Bag End. The startled hobbits peered out of lamp-lit doors to gape at it. It was driven by outlandish folk, singing strange songs, dwarves with long beards and deep hoods. A few of them remained at Bag End. At the end of the second week in September, a cart came in through Bywater from the direction of the Brandywine Bridge in broad daylight. An old man was driving it all alone. He wore a tall, pointed blue hat, a long grey cloak, and a silver scarf. He had a long white beard and bushy eyebrows that stuck out beyond the brim of his hat. Small hobbit children ran after the cart all through Hobbiton and right up the hill. It had a cargo of fireworks, as they rightly guessed. At Bilbo's front door, the old man began to unload. There were great bundles of fireworks of all sorts and shapes, each labelled with a large red G and an elf rune. That was Gandalf's mark, of course, and the old man was Gandalf the Wizard, whose fame in the Shire was due mainly to his skill with fires, smokes and lights. His real business was far more difficult and dangerous, but the Shire folk knew nothing about it. To them he was just one of the attractions of the party. Hence the excitement of the hobbit children. "G for grand!" they shouted, and the old man smiled. They knew him by sight, though he only appeared in Hobbiton occasionally, and never stopped long. But neither they nor any but the oldest of their elders had seen one of his firework displays. They now belonged to the legendary past. When the old man, helped by Bilbo and some dwarves, had finished unloading, Bilbo gave a few pennies away, but not a single squib or cracker was forthcoming, for the disappointment of the onlookers. "Run away now," said Gandalf. "You'll get plenty when the time comes." Then he disappeared inside with Bilbo, and the door was shut. The young hobbit stared at the door in vain for a while, and then they made off, feeling that the day of the party would never arrive. Inside Bag End, Bilbo and Gandalf were sitting at the open window of a small room, looking out west onto the garden. The late afternoon was bright and peaceful. The flowers glowed red and golden, snapdragons and sunflowers and nasturtiums trailing all over the turf walls and peeping in at the round windows. "How bright your garden looks," said Gandalf. "Yes," said Bilbo, "I'm very fond of it, and of all the dear old Shire, but I think I need a holiday." "You mean to go on with your plan, then?" "I do. I made up my mind months ago, and I haven't changed it." "Very well. It is no good saying any more. Stick to your plan, your whole plan, mind, and I hope it will turn out for the best, for you and for all of us." "I hope so too. Anyway, I mean to enjoy myself on Thursday and have my little joke." "Who will laugh, I wonder," said Gandalf, shaking his head. "We shall see," said Bilbo. The next day more carts rolled up the hill, and still more carts. People became enthusiastic, and they began to tick off the days on the calendar, and they watched eagerly for the postman, hoping for invitations. Before long the invitations began pouring out, and the Hobbiton post office was blocked, and the Bywater post office was snowed under, and voluntary assistant postmen were called for. There was a constant stream of them going up the hill, carrying hundreds of polite variations on "Thank you, I shall certainly come." Then the weather clouded over. That was on Wednesday, the eve of the party. Anxiety was intense. Then Thursday, September the 22nd, actually dawned. The sun got up, the clouds vanished, flags were unfurled, and the fun began. Bilbo Baggins called it a party, but it was really a variety of entertainments rolled into one. Practically everybody living near was invited. Very few were overlooked by accident, but as they turned up all the same, that did not matter. Many people from other parts of the Shire were also asked, and there were even a few from outside the borders. Bilbo met the guests and additions at the new White Gate in person. When every guest had been welcomed and was finally inside the gate, there were songs, dances, music, games, and of course, food and drink. There were 3 official meals: lunch, tea, and dinner, or supper. But lunch and tea were marked chiefly by the fact that at those times all the guests were sitting down and eating together. At other times there were merely lots of people eating and drinking, continuously, from 11s until 6:30 when the fireworks started. The fireworks were by Gandalf. They were not only bought by him, but designed and made by him, and the special effects, set pieces and flights of rockets were let off by him. But there was also a general distribution of squibs, crackers, baccarat, sparklers, torches, dwarf candles, elf fountains, goblin barkers and thunderclaps. They were all superb. The art of Gandalf improved with age. There were rockets like a flight of scintillating birds singing with sweet voices. There were green trees with trunks of dark smoke. Their leaves opened like a whole spring unfolding in a moment, and then shining branches dropped glowing flowers down upon the astonished hobbits, disappearing with a sweet scent just before they touched their upturned faces. And there was also one last surprise in honour of Bilbo, and it startled the hobbits exceedingly, as Gandalf had intended. The lights went out. A great smoke went up. It shaped itself like a mountain seen in the distance and began to glow at the summit. It spouted green and scarlet flames. Out flew a red golden dragon. Not life-size, but terribly lifelike. Fire came from his jaws. His eyes glared down. There was a roar, and he whizzed 3 times over the heads of the crowd. They all ducked, and many fell flat on their faces. The dragon passed like an express train, turned a somersault, and burst over Bywater with a deafening explosion. "That is the signal for supper," said Bilbo. The pain and alarm vanished at once, and the prostrate hobbits leapt to their feet. There was a splendid supper for everyone, that is, except those invited to the special family dinner party. This was held in the great pavilion with the tree. The invitations were limited to 12 dozen, a number also called by the hobbits 1 gross, though the word was not considered proper to use for people. And the guests were selected from all the families to which Bilbo and Frodo were related, with the addition of a few special unrelated friends such as Gandalf. After the feast, more or less, came the speech. Most of the company were, however, now in a tolerant mood at that delightful stage which they called filling up the corners. They were sipping their favourite drinks and nibbling at their favourite dainties, and their fears were forgotten. They were prepared to listen to anything now, and to cheer at every full stop. "My dear people," began Bilbo, rising in his place. "Hear, hear, hear," they shouted, and kept on repeating it in chorus, seeming reluctant to follow their own advice. Bilbo left his place and went and stood on a chair under the illuminated tree. The light of the lanterns fell on his beaming face. The golden buttons shone on his embroidered silk waistcoat. They could all see him standing, waving one hand in the air, the other was in his trouser pocket. "My dear Bagginses and Boffins," he began again, "and my dear Tooks and Brandybooks and Grubbs and Chubbs and Burrowsers and Hornblowers and Bulgers, Bracegirdles, Goodbodies, Brockhouses and Proudfoots." "Proud feet!" shouted an elderly hobbit from the back of the pavilion. His name, of course, was Proudfoot, and well merited. His feet were large, exceptionally furry, and both were on the table. "Proudfoots," repeated Bilbo. "Also my good Sackville Bagginses that I welcome back at last to Bag End. Today is my 111th birthday. I am 71 today." "Hooray, hooray, many happy returns," they all shouted, and they hammered joyously on the tables. Bilbo was doing splendidly. This was the sort of speech they liked, short and obvious. "I hope you're all enjoying yourselves as much as I am," he continued. Deafening cheers, cries of yes and no, noises of trumpets and horns, pipes and flutes and other musical instruments. "I shall not keep you long," he cried. Cheers from all the assembly. "I have called you all together for a purpose." Something in the way that he said this made an impression. There was almost silence, and one or two of the Tooks pricked up their ears. "Indeed, for 3 purposes. First of all, to tell you that I am immensely fond of you all, and that 71 years is too short a time to live among such excellent and admirable hobbits." Tremendous outburst of approval. "I don't know half of you as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve." This was unexpected and rather difficult. There was some scattered clapping, but most of them were trying to work out and see if it was a compliment or an insult. "Secondly, to celebrate my birthday." Cheers again. "I should say our birthday, for it is, of course, also the birthday of my heir and nephew, Frodo. He comes of age and into his inheritance today." Some perfunctory clapping by the elders, and some loud shouts of "Frodo! Frodo! Jolly old Frodo!" from the juniors. The Sackville Bagginses scowled and wondered what was meant by coming into his inheritance. "Together we score 144. Your numbers were chosen to fit this remarkable total, 1 gross, if I may use the expression." No cheers. This was ridiculous. Many of his guests, and especially the Sackville Bagginses, were insulted, feeling such that they had only been asked to fill up the required number, like goods in a package. 1 gross indeed. What a vulgar expression. "Thank you very much for coming to my little party." Obstinate silence from everyone. They all feared that a song or some poetry was now imminent, and they were getting bored. Why couldn't he stop talking and let them drink his health? But Bilbo did not sing or recite. He paused for a moment. "Thirdly and finally," he said, "I wish to make an announcement." He spoke this last word so loudly and suddenly that everyone sat up who still could. "I regret to announce that, though, as I said, 71 years is far too short a time to spend among you, this is the end. I am going. I'm leaving now. Goodbye." He stepped down and vanished. There was a blinding flash of light and the guests all blinked. When they opened their eyes, Bilbo was nowhere to be seen. 144 flabbergasted hobbits sat back speechless. Old Odo Proudfoot removed his feet from the table and stamped. Then there was a dead silence, until suddenly, after several deep breaths, every Baggins, Boffin, Took, Brandybuck, Grubb, Chubb, Burrows, Bulger, Bracegirdle, Brockhouse, Goodbody, Hornblower and Proudfoot began to talk at once. It was generally agreed that the joke was in very bad taste, and more food and drink were needed to cure the guests of shock and annoyance. "He's mad. I always said so," was probably the most popular comment. Even the Tooks, with a few exceptions, thought Bilbo's behaviour was absurd. For the moment, most of them took it for granted that his disappearance was nothing more than a ridiculous prank. Frodo was the only one present who had said nothing. For some time he had sat silent beside Bilbo's empty chair and ignored all remarks and questions. He had enjoyed the joke, of course, even though he had been in the know. He had difficulty in keeping from laughter at the indignant surprise of the guests, but at the same time he felt deeply troubled. He realised suddenly that he loved the old hobbit dearly. Most of the guests went on eating and drinking and discussing Bilbo Baggins's oddities, past and present, but the Sackville Bagginses had already departed in wrath. Frodo did not want to have any more to do with the party. He gave orders for more wine to be served, then he got up and drained his own glass silently to the health of Bilbo and slipped out of the pavilion. As for Bilbo Baggins, even while he was making his speech, he had been fingering the golden ring in his pocket, his magic ring that he had kept secret for so many years. As he stepped down, he slipped it on his finger, and he was never seen by any hobbit in Hobbiton again. He walked briskly back to his hole and stood for a moment listening with a smile to the din in the pavilion and to the sounds of merrymaking in other parts of the field. Then he went in. He took off his party clothes, folded up and wrapped in tissue paper his embroidered silk waistcoat and put it away. Then he put on quickly some old and tidy garments and fastened round his waist a worn leather belt. On it he hung a short sword in a battered black leather scabbard. From a locked drawer smelling of mothballs, he took out an old cloak and hood. They had been locked up as if they were very precious, but they were so patched and weather-stained that their original colour could hardly be guessed. It might have been dark green. They were rather too large for him. He then went into his study and from a large strong box took out a bundle wrapped in old clothes and a leather-bound manuscript, and also a large bulky envelope. The book and bundle he stuffed into the top of a heavy bag that was standing there, already nearly full. Into the envelope he slipped his golden ring and its fine chain, and then sealed it, and addressed it to Frodo. At first he put it on the mantelpiece, but suddenly he removed it and stuck it in his pocket. At that moment the door opened and Gandalf came quickly in. "Hello," said Bilbo. "I wondered if you would turn up." "I am glad to find you visible," replied the wizard, sitting down in a chair. "I wanted to catch you and have a few final words. I suppose you feel that everything has gone off splendidly and according to plan." "Yes, I do," said Bilbo. "Though the flash was surprising, it quite startled me, let alone the others. A little addition of your own, I suppose." "It was. You have wisely kept that ring secret all these years, and it seemed to me necessary to give your guests something else that would explain your sudden vanishment." "And would spoil my joke. You are an interfering old busybody," laughed Bilbo. "But I expect you know best, as usual." "I do, when I know anything, but I don't feel too sure about this whole affair. It has come to the final point. You have had your joke and alarmed or offended most of your relations, and given the whole Shire something to talk about for 9 days, or 99 more likely. Are you going any further?" "Yes, I am. I feel I need a holiday, a very long holiday, as I have told you before. Probably a permanent holiday. I don't expect I shall return. In fact, I don't mean to, and I have made all arrangements." "I am old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I am beginning to feel it in my heart of hearts. Well preserved indeed," he snorted. "Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean, like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. That can't be right. I need a change, or something." Gandalf looked curiously and closely at him. "No, it does not seem right," he said thoughtfully. "No, after all, I believe your plan is probably the best." "Well, I've made up my mind anyway. I want to see mountains again, Gandalf. Mountains! And then find somewhere where I can rest. In peace and quiet, without a lot of relatives prying around and a string of confounded visitors hanging on the bell. I might find somewhere where I can finish my book. I have thought of a nice ending for it." And he lived happily ever after to the end of his days. Gandalf laughed. "I hope he will, but nobody will read the book, however it ends." "Oh, they may, in years to come. Frodo has read some already, as far as it has gone. You'll keep an eye on Frodo, won't you?" "Yes, I will. 2 eyes, as often as I can spare them." He would come with me, of course, if I asked him. In fact, he offered to once, just before the party, but he does not really want to yet. I want to see the wild country again before I die, and the mountains, but he is still in love with the Shire, with woods and fields and little rivers. He ought to be comfortable here. I'm leaving everything to him, of course, except a few oddments. I hope he will be happy when he gets used to being on his own. It's time he was his own master now." "Everything," said Gandalf. "The ring as well? You agreed to that, you remember." "Well, yes, I suppose so," stammered Bilbo. "Where is it?" "In an envelope, if you must know," said Bilbo impatiently. "There, on the mantelpiece. Well, no, here it is, in my pocket." He hesitated. "Isn't that odd now?" he said softly to himself. "Yet after all, why not? Why shouldn't it stay there?" Gandalf looked very hard at Bilbo. There was a gleam in his eyes. "I think, Bilbo," he said quietly, "I should leave it behind. Don't you want to?" "Well, yes and no. Now it comes to it, I don't like parting with it at all, I may say, and I don't really see why I should." "Why do you want me to?" he asked, and a curious change came over his voice. It was sharp with suspicion and annoyance. "You're always badgering me about my ring, but you have never bothered me about the other things that I've got on my journey." "No, but I had to badger you," said Gandalf. "I wanted the truth. It was important. Magic rings are, well, magical, and they are rare and curious. I was professionally interested in your ring, and you may say I still am. I should like to know where it is, if you go wandering again. Also, I think you have had it quite long enough. You won't need it anymore, Bilbo, unless I am quite mistaken." Bilbo flushed, and there was an angry light in his eyes. His kindly face grew hard. "Why not?" he cried. "And what business is it of yours, anyway, to know what I do with my own things? It is my own. I found it. It came to me." Yes, said Gandalf, "but there is no need to get angry." "If I am, it is your fault," said Bilbo. "It is mine, I tell you, my own. My precious, yes, my precious." The wizard's face remained grave and attentive, and only a flicker in his deep eyes showed that he was startled and indeed alarmed. "It has been called that before," he said, "but not by you." "But I say it now, and why not? Even if Gollum said the same once, it's not his now, but mine, and I shall keep it, I say." Gandalf stood up. He spoke sternly. "You will be a fool if you do, Bilbo," he said. "You make that clearer with every word you say. It has got far too much hold on you. Let it go, and you can go by yourself and be free." Gandalf's eyes remained bent on the hobbit. Slowly his hands relaxed, and he began to tremble. "I don't know what has come over you, Gandalf," he said. "You have never been like this before. What is it all about?" "It is mine, isn't it? I found it, and Gollum would have killed me if I hadn't kept it. I'm not a thief, whatever he said." "I have never called you one," Gandalf answered, "and I am not one either. I am not trying to rob you, but to help you. I wish you would trust me, as you used to." He turned away and the shadow passed. He seemed to dwindle again to an old grey man, bent and troubled. Bilbo drew his hand over his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I felt so queer. And yet it would be a relief in a way not to be bothered with it anymore. It has been so growing on my mind lately. Sometimes I felt it like it was an eye looking at me, and I am always wanting to put it on and disappear, don't you know, or wondering if it is safe and pulling it out to make sure. I tried locking it up once, but I found I couldn't rest without it in my pocket. I don't know why. I don't seem to be able to make up my mind." "Then trust mine," said Gandalf. "It is quite made up. Go away and leave it behind. Stop possessing it. Give it to Frodo, and I will look after him." "Very well," said Bilbo. "It goes to Frodo with all the rest. Now I'm off." They went into the hall. Bilbo chose his favourite stick from the stand, then he whistled. 3 dwarves came out of different rooms where they had been busy. "Is everything ready?" asked Bilbo. "Everything packed and labelled?" "Everything," they answered. "Well, let's start then." He stepped out of the front door. It was a fine night and the black sky was dotted with stars. He looked up, sniffing the air. What fun! What fun to be off again. Off on the road with dwarves. This is what I've really been longing for years. "Goodbye," he said, looking at his old home and bowing to the door. "Goodbye, Gandalf." "Goodbye for the present, Bilbo. Take care of yourself. You are old enough and perhaps wise enough now." "Take care. I don't care. Don't you worry about me, as I am as happy now as I have ever been, and that is saying a great deal. I am being swept off my feet at last," he added, and then, in a low voice, as if to himself, he sang softly as he stepped off into the dark. Frodo came in soon afterwards and found Gandalf sitting in the dark, deep in thought. "Has he gone?" he asked. "Yes," answered Gandalf, "he has gone at last." I hoped until this evening that it was only a joke," said Frodo, "but I knew in my heart that he really meant to go. He always used to joke about serious things. I wish I had come back sooner, just to see him off." "I think really he preferred slipping off quietly in the end," said Gandalf. "Don't be too troubled. He'll be all right now. He left a packet for you. There it is." Frodo took the envelope from the mantelpiece and glanced at it, but did not open it. "You'll find his will and all the other documents in there, I think," said the wizard. "You are the master of Bag End now, and also, I fancy, you'll find a golden ring." "The ring?" exclaimed Frodo. "Has he left me that? I wonder why. Still, it may be useful." "It may be, and it may be not," said Gandalf. "I should not make use of it if I were you, but keep it secret and keep it safe." "I don't understand," said Frodo. "Neither do I," answered the wizard. "I have merely begun to wonder about the ring, especially after tonight. No need to worry, but if you take my advice, you will use it very seldom, or not at all. At least, I beg you not to use it in any way that will cause talk or rouse suspicion. I say again, keep it safe and keep it secret." "You are very mysterious. What are you afraid of?" "I am not certain," answered the wizard, "so I will not say any more. I may be able to tell you something when I come back. I'm going off at once, so this is goodbye for the present." He got up. Frodo saw him to the door. He gave a final wave of his hand and walked off at a surprising pace, but Frodo thought the old wizard looked unusually bent, almost as if he was carrying a great weight. The evening was closing in, and his cloaked figure quickly vanished into the twilight. Frodo did not see him again for a long time.